And I remember stepping out onto that country road under those stars, feeling like I was in a bad dream. But strangely, in the middle of the worst night of my life, I also experienced something I can only describe as peacefulness. Hi, it's Missy Hilmer, your host for the Finding Hope podcast. This podcast was created for anyone walking through loss, change, or difficult seasons while searching for hope and healing. Over the next few months, I'll be sharing pieces of my story and how God has carried me through the loss of my son Tyler, while exploring what it means to rest, renew, and restore our mind, body, and soul. My prayer is that these conversations remind you that even in your hardest times, you are not alone, healing is possible, and hope can be found one day at a time. Episode 1, titled, The Rest Our Souls Are Craving. I hope you find it encouraging and helpful as you listen in today. So here we go. Every little thing is going to be all right, are the words I heard that beautiful fall night as I stood in the middle of the country road. You see, my life felt perfect up to this point. We had just moved to Palmer, built a house, work was good, school had just started. The night was a perfect, beautiful fall night with a full moon, gentle breeze, and the sky full of stars. It was a night I would not forget. And it was a night that changed my life. Have you ever had a day that changed you? There was a moment in my life when faith went on steroids, or what I like to call supernatural kind of faith, the kind you can't explain and only know that it was from God. On August 23rd, 2013, my life changed forever. My middle son, Tyler, had just turned 15 3 days earlier. Like most teenage boys, he loved being with his friends. That night was no different. He asked if he could go ride with some buddies to switch out vehicles. He said it would only take 30 minutes, not long. But 30 minutes turned into an hour, and I eventually got that phone call from my husband that changed everything. He had said that there had been an accident and Tyler wasn't good. I remember falling to my knees, and I remember that supernatural strength and focus God gave me to make the 911 call. I remember my dad driving me to the accident less than 2 miles from our house. And I remember stepping out onto that country road under those stars, feeling like I was in a bad dream. But strangely, in the middle of the worst night of my life, I also experienced something I can only describe as peacefulness. As I stood there in the middle of the road, I heard these words so clearly. Everything's going to be all right. You're going to get through this. Those words were the same words Tyler used to tell me whenever I would get worked up. He'd always say, Mom, everything's going to be all right. And even though nothing about that night was all right, somehow, deep in my soul, God was already reminding me I was not alone. It gave me hope and peace, and I found comfort in that. You know, when life breaks apart unexpectedly, one of the hardest things is the weight we carry, trying to understand the whys and what ifs. And maybe you know how that feels too. Maybe your story looks differently than mine. Maybe it's also a loss or a diagnosis, a divorce, shattered dreams, maybe a season of loneliness, or simply the exhaustion of carrying too much for too long. And that's why the words of Jesus in Matthew 11:28-30 mean so much. It says, Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You know, what I love about that scripture is Jesus doesn't say, come to me when you have it all figured out, or come to me when you stop crying or when you're strong. Absolutely not. He says, come to me with all of that stuff and more, the burdens, the brokenness, the weariness, because Jesus understands the weight people carry. And honestly, so many of us spend our lives pretending that we're fine. We smile, we keep moving, we stay busy, but underneath it all, our souls are exhausted. And I think sometimes we believe rest will come when life finally settles down, whatever that means. I guess when the bills are paid, when grief is gone, when the answers finally make sense. But Jesus offers a different kind of rest. Yeah, not escape from life, but peace in the middle of it. And that's where Psalm 23:2 connects so beautifully. It says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Wow, what a peaceful image. A shepherd gently leads tired sheep towards rest. Did you know sheep will not lie down unless they feel safe? I didn't. They won't rest if they're anxious or afraid. I think many of us live spiritually exhausted because we've forgotten we were never meant to carry life alone. God never asked us to hold the entire weight of our pain by ourselves. Psalm 23 reminds us he leads us beside still waters, not rushing waters, not chaos, not fear, but still, calm, peaceful waters, a place where our soul can breathe again. You see, after Tyler died, I didn't understand what God was doing. People started showing up at the right time. I began to feel peace most unexpectedly. There was encouragement right at the perfect time when I needed it. And I felt strength that I couldn't explain. There was God moments. I realized something important. God had never left me on that road. He was walking beside me the entire time. And maybe you who are listening today needed to hear that too. God has not abandoned you in your heartbreak. Even if life feels confusing, even if the future feels uncertain, and even if your prayers feel unanswered, the shepherd is still leading. One of the things grief taught me is that healing rarely happens all at once. No, it happens one breath at a time, one step at a time, and one surrender at a time. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply come to Jesus wholeheartedly and honestly, not all polished, not all put together. I think many people picture God disappointed in them for struggling, but scripture paints a different picture. A shepherd leading weary people to rest. And that doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy, because it won't. Trusting God doesn't erase pain, because it won't. And I realized something. The night that should have destroyed me became the very place where God met me most. Not because the pain was gone, but because God stayed faithful in the middle of it. And maybe today you're standing on your own country road kind of moment, a place in your life you never expected to be. And maybe you're wondering, how do I move forward? How do I keep going? And how do I carry this? Can I remind you of something? You do not have to carry it alone. Jesus is still saying, come to me. Not tomorrow, not when you have it all figured out, not when you're stronger, but now. So what does that look like? Well, maybe your next step is slowing down long enough to breathe, Maybe it's spending quiet time with God each morning. Maybe it's reading scripture before you reach for your phone or taking a walk, or maybe it's sleeping as much as your body needs, not what you think it should. And maybe it's a grief support group instead of isolating. You see, I also like creating a rest list, which are just little things that you can do that would give you rest. Maybe it's sitting outside, absorbing that sunshine, vitamin D. Maybe it's reading, walking, quiet music. Maybe it's just sleeping. You see, healing often begins with small steps of surrender. And maybe the most powerful takeaway today is this: rest is not weakness. Rest is not quitting. Rest is how healing begins. And rest is trusting that God can hold what you cannot. Trusting that He is still leading even when you cannot see the full picture. Because the shepherd still leads us beside still waters. And Jesus still invites us as weary people to come. And hope is still available. I want to leave you with a couple questions to reflect on. 1, what could change your life if you truly believed God was with you and walking beside you in your pain? 2, could it be as simple as being led to still waters? It's often in the quiet moments that we hear God's voice. And maybe, just maybe, rest is what our soul is craving. Thanks for listening today, everyone. Join me back here next month for another episode of Finding Hope. I hope you have a great day. Our disclaimer: I am not a counselor, a therapist. The information shared is meant to guide and encourage you through loss, challenges, and difficult seasons as you search for hope and healing. Through personal experiences, faith, and scripture, and helpful resources, our desire is to remind you that you are not alone on your journey.